Good morning. We are learning the Rashi Sicha from Chelek Kaftes on Parshas Eikev, Sicha Aleph. So let's go. Aleph. The Poske Parshasenu, Shebahem Moshe, the Psuke Parshasenu, Shebahem Moshe Benu, Misaer as Sipor Aliaso Lahar, Lakabel Saluchos Makadosh Baruch Hu, Shvut v'nishanos kama pamin halashamos luchos ha'avanim v'luchos habris v'Rashi alasar heti kateva luchos v'perush latet ksiv sheshtehem shavot luchos ksiv sheshtehem shavot. So in our parsha, Moshe is explaining the story of when he went up on Har Sinai and got the luchos from Hashem. And the word luchos is actually written many times. It says luchos ha'avanim, the tablets of stone, the luchos habrit, the tablets of the covenant. And Rashi, in this place, he takes out the word luchos and he explains that it means that both of them were identical. So I want to just show you a little screen share, what the psukim look like. I highlighted in yellow between Pasuk Tes and Pasuk Yud Ches how many times the word luchos is mentioned. It's many, many times. Now our Chumashim bring out this Rashi on Pasuk Yud. The Rebbe is going to tell us that it's actually talking, it could potentially be talking about all the times that luchos is mentioned between these words, the Asher Bahar, and these words in Pasuk Yud Ches. Why? Because Rashi comments over here, the highlighted in green. He also comments on Yud Ches, highlighted in green. So the comment on luchos comes in between those two comments, which is to say that it falls somewhere in this area. Does that make sense? Okay. V'hine Rashi eno mitzayin me'eze pasuk hatik beparshas beperusho esateva luchos. So Rashi does not indicate which exact pasuk he's referring to when he interprets, when he comments on the words luchos. Ela she'al pi hamakom shabo kava perusho zeh bein perusho pasuk tes leperusho pasuk yud ches. But rather that his interpretation falls somewhere between pasuk tes and pasuk yud ches. Move on sheperushe kai al hateva luchos hamofia bein shnei psukim elo. And it's clear that the interpretation falls out between those two psukim. So maybe I'll just show you that chart again, since we saw it. It's not really a chart, but the psukim look like this, since we saw it, the Rebbe explaining it to us. And then the brackets, v'machar sheva psukim shebeinehem nizkaret teva zo kama pamnim, pasuk yud, vayiten Hashem elai shnei luchos avanim ktuvim, gomer, Pasuk Yud Aleph, Vayhi miketz arba'im yom v'arba'im laila, Natan Hashem es shnei luchos avanim luchos abris. Pasuk Tes Vav, Ve'efen ared min hahar gomer v'shnei luchos abris al shtei yadei. The Pasuk Yud Zayin, Bet Pash v'shnei haluchos v'eshlachas gomer, v'ashreichem leinechem. Sarich lomar, echad min hashtayim, Kavanas Rashi hi lechad mi bein hapsukim bilvad, or kavanas lechol hatevos luchos haktuvos chaser laorach kol pamim elu. Okay, so the Rebbe just went through the different psukim where the word luchos appears. And as you see in Pasuk Yud, Hashem gave me the 2 stone tablets inscribed by the finger of God, on which were engraved all the words that God spoke with you on the mountain out of the midst of the fire of the day of the assembly. Pasuk Yud Aleph, at the end of 40 days and 40 nights, God gave me 2 stone tablets, the tablets of the covenant. Tes Vav, I turned and came down from the mountain was ablaze with fire, and the 2 tablets of the covenant were in my 2 hands. And Yud Zayin, so I grasped the 2 tablets and hurled them from my 2 hands, shattering them before your eyes. So the Rebbe is saying that, well, Rashi doesn't say exactly which appearance of the word luchos he's talking about. It could either be a specific one or all of them that are written in lashon chatzer, which means shortened language, missing the vav. So when I say missing the vav, the word luchos technically could have 2 vavs in it, lamed vav, ches vav, saf. So here it has the vav after the lamed, but the vav that we're talking about, which is missing in many of the occurrences, is the second vav. If you look at Yud Aleph, we have it written lashon chatzer over here, chatzer, sorry, without a vav after the ches, and we have it written in lashon malay, otherwise known as full language or elongated, with the vav after the ches. This is the vav that we're referring to. The first vav is not the one that we're discussing whether it's there or not there. Are we good? Okay, so right after the brackets. Aval bar sharashi lokai b'shtei hapamim shetevas luchos ktuva chaser hamofia b'tchilas pasuk tes. Sorry about that. Balti hahara lakachas luchos havanim luchos habris gomer sheharei ein perusho al luchos ktav Rashi lachar perush al hatevas va'asher bahar hamofia lahalan pasuk tes. So we're not talking about the two appearances of the word luchos and pasuk tes that come over here, because Rashi comments on these words v'asher bahar, and this comment falls after that comment. So therefore, the conversation that we're having about the appearance of the word luchos is not going to be on pasuk tes, because those come before the comment that precedes the comment that we're discussing. V'tzarech lahavin. Let me stop this share. Perush zeh shemin hanichtav luchos chatzer lamadnu sheshtehem shavot. So this comment that we're looking at, the word luchos written in abbreviated or lashon chatzer, we learn, Rashi says it means that the two of them are identical. Haviu Rashi kvar beparshas Tisa. So this exact same comment was actually brought by Rashi a long time ago in Shmos in Parshas Tisa. Al hapasuk, on the pasuk, it's a Shmos Lamed Aleph Yud Ches. It's actually on the chart that I mentioned from Rabbi Garari, if you want to look at that. It'd be box number 6. The pasuk reads, "Vaiten el Moshe kechalato ledavar ito bahar Sinai shnei luchos edus luchos even." And Hashem gave to Moshe on Har Sinai the 2 tablets of testimony, tablets of stone. And Rashi writes, "Luchos kativ shehayu shteyem shavod," and it's written luchos lamed ches taf saf, to imply, to teach us that they are identical. Ela shema'achar shebein perush zeh la'ayo lahofia hateva luchos kan yesh hapasuk shel ribui parshios v'Torah ve'yoter mishnei chumashim chazar Rashi v'chapal perush zeh shuv b'parshasenu v'kmo shematzinu kama pamim keosei bazeh perusho. So because many psukim, 2 full books of Chumash, fall in between these 2 comments from Rashi, which are identical, by the way, the same, he says the same thing in both places, but because there's many psukim that fall in between it, Rashi repeats himself, as the Rebbe says, and this happens many times in the Torah. So this is nothing to get excited about, that Rashi repeated himself, that he said something in Parshas Tisa, in Shmos, and he says the same thing in our Parsha. I should have brought you a visual of but if you open up the Chumash and you just want to look in, if you just want to look at what it says on Rashi, Rashi writes, luchos ketiv sheshteyem shavot. It's written luchos without the final vav, to like a singular form, to teach us that they were both identical. It's our parsha, and the same thing is said in Kisisa. And the Rebbe is explaining to us, or reminding us, because I guess we all know this, that it's normal, so to speak, for Rashi to repeat himself if many psukim, or even a full 2 books of Chumash, are in between those 2 instances. Aval ena move on. Mipnei ma perush zo Rashi b'parshasenu al asar al echad or al kol hapsukim zahalan, Yud, Yud Aleph, Tes Vav, Yud Zayin, v'lo miyad b'makom shabo nichtav kan luchos haser b'pam harishona b'pasuk tes. So the question that we do indeed have is not why is he repeating something from Parshas Kisisa, but rather why is he telling it to us either on Yud, Yud Aleph, Tes Vav, or Yud Zayin when it appears right there in Pasuk Tes? Why doesn't Rashi tell us on Pasuk Tes, give us an understanding of why Luchos is written without the final Vav before the Saf? Ve'ein lomar shirashi mefarish zot al pasuk Yud Aleph or Yud Al Dafka mitzad ze shesham chaseros v'tevas luchos shtei havavim. Hainu gam havav shelachar halamed va'al pasuk tes Yud shenichta behem luchos bevav le'achar halamed ki letoichan haperush luchos katav shtehem shavot nogea rak havav shelachar haches. Now you can't say that Rashi doesn't say it on Pasuk Yud Aleph or Yud Zayin, which are missing the vav that comes before which are missing both vavs. Maybe I should go back to my share. Stop unsharing it. I told you this is going to be a very technical Tzipah. So we're not going to say that Rashi is only talking about Yud Aleph or Yud Zayin that are both missing the first vav. And we're not going to say he's talking about Pasuk Yud or Tes, for example. We already know he's not talking about Tes, which are missing the second Vav. Ki l'toichan haperish luchos k'tiv shteim shavot, because the implication, the meaning where we learn his comment that it's written luchos without the Vavs to teach us that they're identical. Nogea rak havav shela achar haches is only relevant for the word luchos missing the second vav that comes after the ches. Shechasrono dafka mishana as tevos luchot melashon rabim lelashon yachid, because that second vav is what potentially can change the word from plural to singular. Masha enkan havav shelachar halamed eno mishana me'umam be'inyan zeh. In contradistinction, the vav that comes after the lamed doesn't change the meaning, doesn't change anything to do with plural or singular. V'gam kasher luchos kativ chaser vav rak lachar haches b'yadenu limod mekan shestayam shavot. So it's specifically from missing the second vav that we learn that the two of them were identical. Seif tes. Zot ve'od im Rashi nizakek l'shuv v'lechaful perush zeh shehuva beparshas Tisa lachar hapasuk ha'aroch shebein chumash shmot l'chumash shvarim. So even more so, if Rashi is coming to repeat himself, something he already told us in Parshas Tisa, because so many psukim have passed. Hayalo lakdim zot od yoter ve'lavia ta perush lo beparshasenu Eikev ela beparshas Veschanan. So if Rashi is concerned to tell us this because he thinks we forgot from Parshas Kisisa, he could have actually told us last week, not in this week's Parsha, but in last week's Parsha Veschanan. Shagam sham namar lachar aser dibros luchos chaser vav, because over there it also says after the Ten Commandments are read, the word luchos without the vav. The pasuk is vayachtov al shnei avanim al shnei luchos avanim. Alive. And it was written on 2 stone tablets, and he gave them to me. Sorry, I don't have that pasuk to show you. Lamito shel davar, timia zo atzum yisor af benogea leperusho bepam harishna. So we have a question that shouldn't this comment have been on the first time that it appeared? B'sefer Shmos, b'parshas Tisa gam ein zeh hapam harishona shenichtav luchos chatzer. So even back in Parshas Kisisa, where we already just told you many psukim ago, 2 full chumashim ago, Rashi gave this same comment. But by the way, that also wasn't the first time it appeared. It actually appeared Parsha before, like I think it's 3 Parshas before that, in Parshas Mishpatim. Ela hadavar mivia kvar bekatuv kodem lakan beparshas mishpatim. This came up in Parshas Mishpatim. It's actually number 5 if you have the chart. Chaf Daled Yud Beis. Ve'etna lach es luchos ha'evan, and I gave you the stone tablets, luchos ketiv chatzer ve'chesron shtei havavim. And over there, the word luchos is written in the shortened version without, it's missing both vavs. The diuk kmo beparshas tisa, the lama efo lo pirashot Rashi beparshas mishpatim, and it's exactly like it appears in Parshas Kitisa. And Rashi didn't say anything over there. Why did he wait? Sorry, yeah, he didn't say anything in Mishpatim. Kasher nifta b'pam harishona luchos chatzer ve'ikev es perisho al parshas tisa. So one would think that the comments would have come up the first time that it was written in the shortened version, and not 2 parshas later in Kisisa. So I hope that this is making sense so far. But the direction that we're going in, what we're building up, is that Rashi is not simply coming to talk about the way words are written. That's not the purpose of Rashi, to say lashon chatzer, lashon malay means this, means that. I guess I'll jump ahead, because maybe it'll help the sikha to be understandable. What the Rebbe is going to tell us is that Rashi is only going to comment on whether or not the abbreviated, or sorry, it's not really abbreviated, but the short form or the long form of the word, if that affects the content, if that affects the meaning of what's going on in the pasuk. He's not going to comment simply to talk about how it's written, which letters are used, just for the sake of it. But he's going to only comment on it if the usage of a short version or a long version of the word affects the meaning of the pasuk and the meaning of what's going on at that point. But that's what we're building towards. It's interesting because I'm gonna just editorialize for a second. This sikha is very thorough, at least in my opinion, going through step by step how the Rebbe is going to get to his conclusions. But I think for some of us, myself included, when the Rebbe says it, we're like, okay, fine. Like, I don't need to hear all the buildup and all the proof of where this idea is coming from. We're like, it's easy just to accept it. Okay, so now tell me the Yenei Shato. Now tell me the exciting meaning for it. But that's not the way the sikha is built. The sikha is built step by step, where the Rebbe is going to show us very methodically why he has this opinion that Rashi is only going to be talking about this spelling issue if it affects the meaning and the concept of the pasuk. So let's keep going. Seif Gimel. Bepashtus hayav shar le'yashev zot al pi hayadua she'inyan shel ktiv mala v'chaser kishehu la'atzmo eno davar hakasha b'pshuto shel mikra. Okay, so simply we can rely on the fact, the known idea, that the concept of if it's written out fully or short version, that this in and of itself does not bother Rashi on the level of pshuto shel mikra, on the level of the basic contextual meaning of a verse. Ad shirashi yeh muchrach letirtzo, unless Rashi needs it as a proof for his answer. V'ketemukach mizeh al pi rov ein Rashi me'akev al inyane mala v'chaser shebe ktuvim. And in general, Rashi does not stop. He doesn't get bothered by most of the cases where things are written in mala or chaser. B'hatam sherashi bachar b'kol zot lehityaches lekach b'parshasenu hu lefi shebepasuk zeh atzmo Yud Aleph, Shina HaKatuv Bazeh Achar Zeh. So the reason that Rashi seemingly is choosing to talk about it in our parsha is because in the pasuk itself, in Yud Aleph, the Torah changes within one pasuk the spelling of the word. As Shnei Luchos HaAvanim, Luchos HaBrit, the 2 stone tablets, the tablets of covenant. So if you look at Yud Aleph, you see here it's written chatzer, and here it's chatzer, sorry, and here it's written malay. See here, there's no vav, and here there is a vav within the same pasuk. Tchila chaser legamre. So the beginning of the pasuk is chatzer completely, meaning it doesn't have either vav. Belachar mikan maleh bevav hashniya, and the second appearance of the word is full with the second vav. Velachen terach Rashi. The parish ki b'shinui zeh Ba hakatuv lahadgish et hateva hachasara kan luchos kativ shesteim shavot. So therefore, Rashi is coming to say that even though the first word is written, chatzer is written missing the vav, it's teaching us that they are both identical. V'mitam zeh ein Rashi mefarish zos b'pasuk tes b'parsha seinu. And if you're going to go according to this logic, this is why Rashi doesn't need to tell us anything in pasuk tes, because you see here they're written the same way. The Shechen b'pasuk zeh b'shtei pamim luchos chatzer kativ, because in pasuk tes, in both occurrences, it's written in the shortened version. Kativ ve'enhu mefarsh zos la'ayil b'parshas Eschanan, and so too, according to his logic, he doesn't explain it last week in parshas Eschanan. Kasher nemar ve'yiftav al shnei luchos avanim, as it says, and I've written on the 2 stone tablets. Vibiparshas mishpatim shekadma leparshas kitisa, and the same logic would hold true to that first occurrence all the way back in mishpatim, which came before kisisa, where he does comment in kisisa. Kevan shebemikomos elu mofia hateva pam echad bilvad. Ve'ein kan shinui bein shtei pamim bepasuk echad, because the word appears just once in all those other instances, and there's no distinction, there's no difference in how it's spelled in all those answers, in all those times. Now, obviously, this is not going to be our final answer, because as you might have noticed, the sikha is quite a bit longer. Amnam bior zeh enon must be key. However, this explanation is not enough because it's enough for us, the Rebbe said, but that's not the way we're going to learn the sikha. Okay, here's the first reason. Aleph, beparshas tisa, af shagam sham nemar bepasuk zeh pa'amayim luchos ha'edus luchos ha'evan harei shtei pamim chaser ve'mimela ein shum shinui bepasuk l'sham hadgasha ve'bekol zo Rashi torach v'mfarish zo sham. Okay, so back in Parshas Kisisa, yes, the word luchos is written twice, but it's spelled the same way both times without the vav. And Rashi over there takes the time, feels the need to answer and to explain to us that it means that both tablets were identical. B'kol ofen yesh lish'ol eta she'ela ha'omeret. So that's one reason why that explanation is not enough, that the change in spelling is what compels Rashi to speak. Because when there was no change in spelling back in Parshas Kisisa, he didn't give his comment. Okay, the second reason, Beis, B'kol ofen yesh lish'ol eta she'ela ha'amora gam b'Parshas Seinu gufa, kilpei ha'ktuvim atzmam. Madua shina ha'katuv v'rmaz b'kach al inyan shteyan shavot, b'pasuk me'uchar yoter yud aleph, v'dafka lo b'pasuk hakodem lo tes, shabo nemra oto hateva pa'amayim. So you can ask a similar question in our own parsha. We have over here in pasuk tes that the word is written twice and it's spelled the same way both times. So why does the Chumash feel the need to differentiate the spelling over here in Yud Aleph, but it didn't in tes? And now are the brackets. But al pizeh move on. She'et hashalet hanal lo nitan lishav b'kaf she'esh kama v'kama deos v'shito shonot b'masar shel chasaros v'yiteros. So don't, now the Rebbe says in the brackets, don't go back and say, okay, it's simple. There's lots of different opinions and shitas on which words are written full and which words are written missing the vav. And Rashi has one shita, and the Chumash that we have today has another shita. That's an easy answer, but that's not the answer. V'hainu she'nemar shel das Rashi hamasora b'parshas tisa hi b'ofen shepam echad nichtav malei v'b'pam echad chaser v'lo v'delo kapayju. So don't say that, okay, the Masorah, the tradition that Rashi has is that over here in Parshas Tisa, one time it's written Malay with with the vav at the end, and one time it's written chaser without the vav, but that's just not the way it is for us. Lifanenu v'delo kifi shehu lifanenu, but that just happens not to be the way it's for us. Different shitas, don't say that. V'leidach beparshatenu shitas Rashi he she lifnei hatevos v'asher bahar nichtav b'shtei pamim luchos chatzer. Ki bein kach tamod be'ena hashela kalpi hapasuk gufa kanal lama shina hakatav b'pasuk yud aleph dafka be'al derek zeh b'parshas tisa. So the real question is not why is it written malay or chatzer. So don't say we have one shita, Rashi's looking at a different shita or a different masorah of how the psukim. The question is, why is there a change? That's the real question in pasuk Yud Aleph. Over here, 2 words apart, it's written differently. And so too, similar question applies to Parshas Ki Tisa. Kedei lahadgish luchas hater kativ shteihem shavot. And this change is what compels Rashi to write that luchos written in Lashon Chatzer is teaching us that both of them are identical. Below b'pasuk tesh shebo nemra oto halashon luchos havanim luchos habris, and that's why he doesn't bring it back in pasuk tes, where again the same words are said, but they're written identically. There's no change in the spelling in tes. Seif Dalid. V'yuvam behektem diuk b'lashon Rashi b'perishav al haTorah b'inyan chaser. So we already understand that Rashi speaks that the focus or the concentration of Rashi in his comments on the Torah, if something is written full or written missing a letters, is that there's a change going. Lifamim Rashi katav chaser vav, chaser ktiv, v'kiyotze bazeh. Sometimes Rashi will write in his comment, it's missing a vav, it's written in short version, v'kiyotze bazeh, and so on. V'bekama makomot, Rashi rak mitzatet et hateva, ba'ofen shabo hi ktuba b'pasuk, b'li lahosiv chaser vav or chaser ktiv, v'kiyotze bazeh. V'kepeshertenu luchos ksiv. And sometimes it's actually that Rashi will not write, it's missing a vav, or it's written in Lashon Chatzer. He'll simply write the way it's written, like in our pasuk. We have Rashi writes the words, on the word luchos, he writes, luchos ksiv sheshtehem shavot. It is written luchos to teach us that both of them are identical. He doesn't write, it's written Lashon Chatzer. To teach us that both of them are identical, meaning he doesn't point out the concept that something's missing. He simply just points out how it's written and tells us that that means that they're both identical. He doesn't say this is written in abbreviated format and therefore it means there's such and such. He just points out to us it's written this way and this is what it means. There are places where he does one and places where he does the other. If you want to just jump ahead, we're not going to look at it this minute, but there's a long hosafa to this sicha on the last page or two with many, many instances where letters are missing or the word is written elongated, and there's a distinction when Rashi points out there's a letter missing or he just points out it's written in such and such way. I'm not going to go through the whole hosafa at the end, but maybe we'll go through one or a handful just to bring out the point of what the difference is when Rashi points out it's written in shortened form versus when Rashi just tells us it's written this way. Okay, so the last paragraph in Daled, V'kevan she'lashono shel Rashi meduyeket hi muvan shegam hashinuim hanal b'lashon Rashi nasa b'kavana v'v'diuk. So don't worry, the Rebbe sees everything with diuk, with intention, and with down to the fine detail, whether or not Rashi points out it's written chatzer, it's written shortened version, or it's just written this way. V'beprat she'elu hem shinuim hamofia b'kama makomos v'perusho shel haTorah. And these changes, these distinctions are pointed out in many places in Rashi's comments on the Torah. Shelatim nakut ba'ofen harishon v'latim ba'ofen hasheni. And sometimes he says like this, and sometimes he says like that. Is it clear the two different styles that Rashi will point out that there's a change? Okay. Seif Hey. V'yesh lomar b'hazvaret hadvarim al pi tosefes bior b'chlal hanal. So one could say, based on what we've explained so far, Reish Seif Gimel, back in Seif Gimel, shehashinui shel chatzeros leumat yeteros, keshehu la'atzmo eno begeder kushe b'pshuto shel mikra. So the change about is it missing the letter or does it have the letter is not something that bothers Rashi in general on the contextual meaning of the verse. Dahaina kushi masug hamachriach es Rashi liyashovo ba'avor ben chamish lemikra. It's only if Rashi feels that he's forced to explain this so that the Ben Chamesh Lemikra, the 5-year-old or the new student to the Chumash needs this to understand what's going on in the pasuk. Ela kasher yesh koshi acher b'pshuto shel mikra, meaning that there's some other question in the Torah that's bothering Rashi that he needs to go into this explanation to explain what that other question is. V'koshi zeh yechol hichashev be'emsaut habir b'inyan chaser v'yeter. As dafka mevi Rashi tashinu v'mivaro. So when this problem, this question that's bothering Rashi, it comes up and can be understood through the writing of the words, either written in chatzer or v'yiter, written fully or written short version, then specifically Rashi will bring out this distinction to explain the answer to whatever that other issue is that's bothering Rashi. Meaning that the spelling in and of itself is not something Rashi is going to touch unless it affects the meaning of what's going on in the pasuk. B'hatam hashinui bein malay lechatzer eno mugeder ke'inyan nifra b'Torah. And the reason for why it is written in one way or the other is not something singled out in Torah. She'ein lo shum shaychas l'limud. That has no connection to the learning, to the overall learning. Pshuto shel mikra, to the contextual meaning of the text. V'rak sheb'shad husrach Rashi mishtamesh b'shinoi shel chatzer v'yeter k'dei liyashav inyan b'pshuto shel mikra b'dugmat sheyamishu shel Rashi be'agada hamiyashevet divrei hamikra. So Rashi will only bring it out when it is connected to what's going on in the pasuk, and sometimes he'll use agada to explain what the answer is. Elegam b'pshuto shel mikra muvan lilmod shemala v'chatzer b'teva b'torah eno inyan b'ofen k'tiva teva zo b'mikra grida. So also, it's simple to know that the way in which a word is written in the Torah is not just an issue of spelling or reading alone, ki'im davar hanoge letochen hateva v'hakatav, but rather the way in which the word is spelled, if it's spelled out fully or written in short version, is something that is relevant to the meaning, to the tochen of the word itself. Hainu shehashinui bein mala lechatzer be'keyotze bazeh me'id al shinui b'tochen hateva or hakatav. But rather, this change from being fully spelled to being missing a letter, etc., is something that shows us a change in the content of the word or the pasuk itself. V'rak shehabiur v'hatam l'shinui zeh, and it's that the explanation of this change, ma achen mivateh shinui zeh shel chaser amala, what is causing this change for the word to be written in short form or long form, eno inyan hanedrish be'et limud pshuto shel mikra, ela davar hamichashech l'sha'ar ofane limud haTorah, is not something just to understand this one verse alone contextually, but rather it's something connected to the entire limud of Torah, to the entire learning of Torah in this section. V'lachen kasher mitzad tochen hakatuv haya ra'ui sheka b'dafka male lefi shavana mevakeshes or tochen hakatuv hi she'ein kol inyan shel chisaron b'nidun zeh v'pol nichtav chatzer muchach Rashi liyashev et hakusha shel ben chamesh lemikra halamai nichtav hateva b'ofen chatzer. So when it's something that, therefore, when something affects the meaning, so Rashi feels that he has to point that out. And when something is missing a letter, usually there's a connotation that there's a lacking, there's a chisaron, that there's something negative going on. There's some sort of negative concept connected to the to something that's lacking. And therefore, Rashi has to explain, why is the letter missing? Seif Vav. Mahadugma lezeh, so an example of this. Okay, so now we're going to jump around all over Chumash. Actually, I think I do have a share for Rabbi Garari's chart. Let me see. Here we go. I do have it. Okay. B'makom harishon b'mikra shebo Rashi mefarish inyan shel chaser. So the first time that Rashi is going to explain to us that there is a letter missing is all the way in Bereshis Aleph Pasuk Yud Daled, so the first parsha, the first parak of the Torah, where it says Yehi Maras Barakia Hashemayim. And Hashem made the firmament and the luminaries in the Shemayim. The Mavar Rashi, Chaser Vav, Kativ al Shahu Yom Ma'ara Chulo. And Rashi writes over here on the words Yehi Marot, because Mar'os could be written with a Vav over there between the Resh and the Saf. Chaser Vav, it's missing a Vav. Kativ al Shahu Yom Ma'ara Lipol Askara B'Tikunim. And this shows us that this is a cursed day. This was a difficult day. Nekudas Tochen Hapsukim Sham Ha'oskim B'Perut Hadvarim Shebara HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'Shesha Shemet Bereshit. So what's going on here? This is Hashem talking about creation of the world. He lahavia levar ma'alasam shel hadvarim shakadosh baruch hu bara. And these psukim, one would understand, one would think, are talking about the greatness of Hashem and what He created. V'vipra v'miyuchad tochen brias ha'ma'aros, and specifically on the creation of the luminaries. V'kisiyum ha'katuv sham v'la'orech kol ma'aseh Bereshis. And as the pasuk closes, and all of Bereshis, you probably are very familiar with this. Vayira Hashem ki tov. What does Hashem say over and over again? Hashem saw, and it was good, ki tov. So from our understanding of just reading these psukim and Parak Aleph, everything is very, very positive. Ve'im ken haya ra'ui likatev me'oris mala. So therefore, if this is an extremely positive set of experiences, Hashem is creating the world, and time again, He's saying ki tov. So the word me'oros should have been written in Lashon Maleh. It should have been written in the elongated version with both vavs. V'lechol hapachos maleh bevav echad bepasuk shelachareze kedei ladgish et hashleimus shebazeh. And even so, in the next pasuk, which we don't have here, it is written maleh, and that's to show that this is a full shleimus. This is full. This is a complete thing. This is a positive thing. But because it's not written that way, Rashi is compelled to comment on it. And now moving along, Parshas Noach, we have over here, number 3. Lachar hamavul nemar bekato veyarach Hashem esreach hanichoach veyomer Hashem elibo lo asaf lekalel od hadama vavor had adam ki yatzar lev ha'adam ra minara velo asaf od lahakot gomer. After the flood, Hashem smelled a beautiful. There was a pleasant smell. Hashem smelled a beautiful smell, and Hashem said that I will no longer curse the ground because the negativity, the evil within man from his youth. It begins from his youth, and I will no longer curse. The Perush Rashi, Mina'arav Ketiv Mishanar Letzet Mima'e Imo Nitan Bo Yetzer Hara. And Rashi says, when it says Mina'arav, from his youth, from his younger years, that the evil comes within a person, the Yetzer Hara, from his youth, which might sound negative, but it's actually positive because it's saying it's not an inborn trait. Evil, the Yetzer Hara comes later. Na'arav is written in Lashon Chatzer. It does not have the vav. And Rashi does not actually tell us over here it's written Lashon Chatzer. He just reiterates how it's written, and then he gives us his explanation. And his explanation, if you look in this little box here, just a little cheap, it's Rotzel Lamatzchus Sheyesh Lo Yatzar Megil Hachi Tzair Benarav Mashmas is a lo mamashchen. That the Yetzer Hara, it does not come in at birth. The Yetzer Hara comes later. So he's actually teaching us a schus over here, and he does not write the words Ketiv Chatzer. Whereas over here, he does write the words Chatzer Vav. It's missing a Vav because this is speaking something negative. Another pasuk that the Rebbe is going to bring, Gimel. Al derech zeh motzim anu lahalan b'parshas Chayei Sarah. So let's go down to Chayei Sarah. And here's the pasuk in Chaisar Ephron Yoshev Betoch B'nei Ches, and Ephron was sitting or settled within the company of the B'nei Ches. And you see, Yoshev could have a vav in it. The Ephron Yoshav Kitziv Chatzer Oto Hayo, and Rashi brings out. He uses the phrase Kitziv Chatzer. It's written in shortened version. And Rashi says that on this day, Ephron was elevated to a shoter, to a high rank, to chief upon the Bnei Chet. And this was because of the chashivus of Abraham, because of the greatness of Abraham, shehaya tzarich lo ala l'gdula. And therefore, because Ephron was seen engaging with Abraham, who was such a great person, his greatness was elevated. He was made into a chief, not from his own merit, but because of the merit of the fact that he was engaging with Abraham. And therefore, it's actually saying something kind of negative about Ephron. And we have precedent over here, Kativ Chatzer. Rashi uses that phrase, Kativ Chatzer. So in our two cases where there's something negative that we're learning, Rashi uses the phrase Chatzer Vav. Over here, he uses the phrase Kativ Chatzer. But over here, where we're actually learning a schus, Rashi just tells us the way it's written. He doesn't use the phrase Lashon Chatzer, Chatzer Vav, etc. So let's read the Gimel part inside. Al dergzeh motzim anu lahalan parshas Chayesara. So in the same vein, we find a verse in Chayesara. The Ephron Yashav, the Mefarish, Rashi, Kativ, Chatzer, Oto, Hayom, Chulo. And Ephron sat, and Rashi says it's written in short version. On that day, he sat. Dihina behemshach haktuvim mivaeres v'dugeshet hamayla shel b'nei ches ve'Ephron ve'haskamato l'mocher v'yiten al ken limsor esmaras hamachpela la'Avraham ba'avor kfuras Sarah. And later in the Chumash, we're going to find a greatness, a good thing spoken about Ephron and Bnei Ches, that they sold and they gave the cave to Abraham in order to bury Sarah. V'lama efo betchila sedivar odos Ephron mofia bekatuv hativa yashav chatzer inyan shel chesaron bo. And Rashi's answering, so why over here? Since later we're going to hear good things about Ephron and Bnei Ches. So why should we think anything bad about them? Why would we even know that there's anything negative about them? Because we're going to hear they sold the Maras Bela to Abraham. But Rashi that's kind of what's bothering Rashi. So Rashi is explaining to us, here's your hint, here's your indicator that there is something negative about Ephron. The word Yoshev was written without the Vav in Lashon Chatzer. And the reason that's a question is because later, as the story of Chayesara continues, we're only going to hear good things about them. Does this make sense? Okay. Seif Zayin. Al pi zeh gam chiluk halashonos bein perush Rashi lefamim ktiv chatzer vav chatzer ktiv v'kiyotze bazeh. So according to this, what we've looked at so far, and if you want to go through the Hotzafa, we're not going to go every single pasuk, but we could look at a few if people want. We can learn a rule, which I think I already told you outside, that the times when Rashi writes the phrase chatzer vav or chatzer ksiv, that it's missing a vav or it's a shortened writing, etc. Lefamim lo chatzab, and sometimes he doesn't write it. Lefamim lo chatzab ken. Kasher chesron hateva bektuv noed lahashmiya inyan shel chisaron betochen hateva. So when the missing letter teaches us something lacking in the content of what we're discussing, or inyan, or idea, azay Rashi noket b'lashon chatzer ksiv. Then Rashi uses the phrase chatzer ktiv. It's shortened writing, b'kayotze bazeh, etc. Ach b'makom shechisaron hateva lo ba lirmoz al chisaron misuyam. However, in a time when the lack of the letter does not hint to or teach us anything negative about what's going on, but rather to clarify and to bring a completely different concept, or letosfeses hadgasha b'inyan hamadubar begufo, ein Rashi nakut b'lashon chaser ktiv, or rather to add something else to what's going on that we wouldn't know otherwise. Then Rashi does not use the phrase chaser ktiv. Shechem b'makom zeh ein kan chisaron, because there's no chisaron, there's no lacking going on b'toichen haperish, in the content of the parish. in the storyline, for lack of a better word. Ella rak madgish et shinui shebeteva. He only shows us that he'll point out the change in the word, but he's not going to use the word chatzer ktiv. There's a missing letter, because missing implies a lacking. Shenoed leramez al tochen ha'inyan hamiyuchad sheyashba. And what he's going to do is point out that there's a change, there's something unique happening to show us what's going on. The vedugnat hanal. So for the example, back to our parsha, the perush harishon al hatevos. Sorry, no, not back to our parsha yet.
Why?
Did you want to say something, Chaya? Okay, so not back to our parsha yet. Sorry. In the first example that was given over here in Bereshis, the perush harishon al hatevos yihi maras katav Rashi chatzer vav v'kativ al shahu yom ma'ara lipolho. So in this Rashi on Bereshis, he writes this phrase chaser vav, and he's using it to show that this is a cursed day. This was a day that negative things happened. Al derech zeh b'pasuk ve'Ephron yashav, and so too on the pasuk of Ephron sat over here. Shebo katav Rashi k'tiv chatzer, and Rashi again wrote the word chatzer. It's k'tiv chatzer. It's a spelling that's missing a letter. This was because this was showing a lacking, something negative about Ephron. B'yachas lifaret shel yashav mesupar kan odo, as Rashi says, with regard to the word yashav, it's teaching us that oto hayam minehu shoter aleha, that day he was made chief upon them, mipnei chashivu shel Avraham shahayat tzarich lo la'ala gdula, because of his dealings with Avraham, not because of his own merits. That's why he rose to greatness. Kolomar hakatuv ba'alaho di'enu b'kach she'Ephron mitzad atzmo hayachatzer. So Rashi's teaching us that the Torah is telling us, in and of himself, Ephron was lacking. And he wasn't chosen out to be anything special. It's like he was in the right place at the right time. Mishar b'nei ches. There was nothing special about him from everybody else. But rather it was the greatness of Avraham that propelled him to rise to greatness. Rak mishahagia ate zo alev vayashav. And it's only until he came to Avraham that he rose to greatness, and therefore it's saying something negative. Masha'en can be Parshas Noach. However, in contradistinction in Parshas Noach, al tevas min na'arav, on the word from their youth, ein Rashi kotev chaser ketziv, as we said over here, in this word min na'arav. I'm gonna have eyes like mine and want to make it a little bigger. Mineu rav. There could be a vav in there if you wanted to. Ein Rashi Ketuv Chaser Ketiv. Rashi does not use the phrase Chaser Ketuv. He just tells us this is how it's written. Mineu rav Ketiv. Or Chaser vav. He doesn't say it's missing a vav. Ella Mineu rav Ketiv Mishna'ar Latzet Chulo. But rather, it's simply written from it. It's written from their youth. Sharei kan yashum inyan shel chaser v'chasaron be'ein shan. Excuse me. Inyan shel chaser v'chasaron benoger lena'arav, because there's no concept of a lacking or a deficiency going on that's implied by the word na'arav. Ba'adarava, and on the contrary, ketiv ze mosif b'tochan hakatuv b'tam hamaba'ar bo. The limud tzchus al ha'adam. But on the contrary, this is actually teaching us a lamud tzchus. This is teaching us a merit, something good about human nature, about people. Shemachar sheteka mishanara letzet mima'e imo niten bo yetzahara. Because only when the child leaves from the influence of his mother that he gets this yetzahara. V'lo mina'ara bilvad, and not simply just by his youth. Nemela mechazak hadavar b'yeter set et hatam lekach shelo asaf lekalel od ha'adama ba'avor ha'adam ki yetzer lev ha'adam ra mina'arav. And this comes to explain to us that Hashem, in the pasuk that we're talking about, has chosen not to curse the land. He's never going to curse the land again like this. So that's a positive thing going on in the pasuk, that Hashem is not going to curse the land. So perhaps you could be saying that Rashi doesn't understand if something positive is happening in the pasuk, that Hashem has declared he'll never send a curse like this, like the Mabul, again to the land. Why would Na'arav be written in Lashon Chatzer? Why is it written in a shortened version? And then he comes to explain to you that it's written in a shortened version without saying the phrase it's written in a shortened version, but it's written like this to teach us a lamatzchus, to teach us a merit, because that's the question that we might be having. Does this make sense? And what the Rebbe is building on is that every time there's going to be a chisaron, a negative connotation to the pasuk, Rashi will use the phrase chatzer vav, ketiv chatzer, lashon chatzer, etc. But when it's not a negative connotation, and here on the contrary, it's actually a positive connotation, he simply tells us it's written this way to teach us that. The al derech zeh be'od kama v'kama mekamot shebahem ein Rashi kotev so many more cases, and don't worry, the Hosafah lists some, and at the end of the Hosafah it says, and there's even more, that Rashi does not use the phrase Chatzer Ksiv. This is a shortened version of the spelling, Mitzad Hatam Hanal, because of what we just discussed. B'ledugma b'pam harishona b'mikra b'psukim achadim bilvad, lacher ha-perush nizkar me'eros chaser vav. And for example, the first appearance in the entire Chumash over here, Bereshis Aleph Yud Daled, where Rashi writes it's missing a vav. Sheba mefarish Rashi inyan shel chaser b'li lehishtamesh b'lashon chaser. He shows us a concept of the second time, where it's written in Bereshis. He's showing us a concept of something that's lacking without using he shows us the concept of a missing vav without using the phrase that there is shortened words. This fits with the same rule, that if Rashi does not tell us Lashon Chatzer or it's missing a vav, then it's a positive thing. So what is going on over here? This is the pasuk, Vayivra Elokim es ha-tanim hagdolim, and Hashem created the big fish, or the big sea creatures is probably a better way to translate that. And I love talking about the Livyasan, because I just remember one of my kids that loves animals, when he was in preschool, he was asked, and the Mower wrote it down, what are you most excited for when Mashiach comes? And he said, so that I can see the Livyasan. So here we go. Here's the source for it. The Divrei Agadahu Livyasan, that according to the Agada, this is the Livyasan that's being referred to as the Tni'im Hagdolim. Uven Zugo Shebara Zachar Unekeva Beharag Esenekeva. And it was born male and female. And Hashem killed or took away, the female. Malacha letzadikim latid lavo she'im yifru v'yirbu lo yitakem ha'olam b'fnehem hatanim ketiv. And why did he do this? Because if male and female Livyasan would reproduce, there would be no room for any existence outside of the two Livyasans. It'd be so large to exist. And he did this in deference to the Sadiqim that would come in the future, that the world shouldn't be completely and totally covered with the Sadiqim. If you'll just give me a tangent, one of my kids told me actually just a few weeks ago that, I'm not going to tell a whole long story, but that it says in the Gemara that Hashem spends a portion of his day with the Livyasan every day because he's lonely. And it's a strange concept. Why would Hashem spend so much time with the Livyasan? And I don't have a source. I know it's being recorded, so I don't have a source. I can't tell you this is the only reason, but the point that he brought out in the story was that Hashem spends time with people that are lonely. And since Hashem took away the mate of the Livyasan, he has a feeling towards the loneliness of the Zachar that remains. But I'm just going to leave that aside. It's nothing to do with the Sikha. I just wanted to share that. But anyway, we're learning something very positive from the lack of the Tanim, from the lack of the Vav in this word, Hatzaninim. We are learning that Hashem took away or killed the female, but this is a positive thing. This is a promise that there will be Sadiqim latid lavo. And if you look into the words over here, you don't see that Rashi brings out the phrase chaser vav or lashon chaser anywhere.
Do you know what the word melecha, or what does that actually translate to?
Where are you looking?
The word before tzaddikim.
Oh, okay. Like
Isn't it
I
salted?
They salted it. They salted it. Like
Does that mean that the tzaddikim will eat it in the la'asid lavai? It will be salted for tzaddikim la'asid lavai?
It's the ultimate herring, Connie.
Oh, something to look forward to. Okay.
okay. Connie, I know that it doesn't say chaser ksiv or chaser vav. That much I can tell you. But thank you very much. V'tam hadavar, I'm at the last line of Zion. V'tam hadavar ki zeh shahat taninim ktiv mipnei shaharag es hanekeva eino inyan shel chasaron. So the fact that it's written taninim, that Hashem killed the nekeva, the female, is not a concept of the lacking. The briyaso shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu ela adaraba, but rather on the contrary, al yedeza huftach kiyum ha'olam. But rather through this, Hashem is promising that the world will exist, because if He had created the female and they would have reproduced, no room for the world. So this is a promise of kiyum ha'olam. Ba'af be'asher l'nekeva atzma hareza melacha l'tzadikin la'atid lavo. And specifically for the female in the future, what's going to happen to her? She will be salted for the sadikim latid lavo, in the future to come. Tzif ches, v'al pizeh kol zeh muvan b'midun didan lagabe tevos luchos. Okay, back to our parsha. All of this is now going to make sense of what's going on with the word luchos in our parsha. Rashi loba b'dvarav kan lifaresh stam madua nemar tevas luchos chatzer kashem she'ein hu mefarish od chaseros v'yateros b'mikra. So Rashi is not coming. Should I go back over here? Stam to tell us what's going on, because Rashi doesn't do that. That's not the way of Rashi, to start explaining a missing letter, a full letter. Rashi mefarish as k'tiv hachatzer shel tevazo rak b'makom shebo hakatuv madgish es ha'ilui shebadavar. Rashi only explains a missing letter in a place, in an instance where it's coming to give us the advantage of what's going on here. Behainu rak beparshas tisa v'beparsasenu, and that's what's happening in our parsha and parshas tisisa. That there's an advantage, there's something special going on that Rashi is bringing out. And this is not explicitly the issue of what's happening in the previous examples in the Torah, like over here, where Rashi doesn't tell us anything on Pasuk Tes. Shebo hakatuv madvish et ha'ilu shebadavar v'hinu rak beparshas tiseh v'parshasenu. And what's not going on is there's nothing specific, there's no mila, there's no advantage being hinted to at the other places in the Torah, but rather significantly over here and also in Parshas Kisisa. Mashen kem b'makomot hakodmim b'Torah, hen b'parshas mishpatim, hakod Parshas Tisa, v'hen b'parshas v'eschanan, hakodmos Parshas Eikev. So in contradistinction, on the other hand, in Parshas Mishpatim, which comes before Parshas Kisisa, or Parshas Veschanan, which comes before our Parsha, Shebehem lo ba hakatuv lahadgish et mailas haluchos. The Torah is not coming to tell us something special, some advantage, some unique special characteristic about the luchos. Ein Rashi mityaches lachen sheluchos chaser ktiv v'kedei lekama, and therefore Rashi doesn't comment that luchos is missing a letter. V'beparshas Tisa nemar ve'ten el Moshe kechalato ledaver oto gomer shnei luchos ha'edus luchos ha'even v'ktivim be'etzba elokim. So let's see if I can show you that pasuk. In Parshas Kisisa, it says over here, Hashem gave to Moshe the luchos to as he spoke to him on Har Sinai, shnei luchos, the luchos of testimony, the tablets of testament, tablets of stone, and he wrote with the finger of God. Tahainu ma'alasam hagdula shel haluchos, and it's telling us the greatness of the luchos. They're written by the hand of God Himself. The al derek zeh yeter mizeh beparshasenu, and so too in our parsha. Vayiten Hashem Elai Eshnei Luchos Avanim Ktuvim Be'etzba Elokim Ve'aleim Kekol Hadvarim Asher Dvar Hashem Imachem Bahar Mitoch Ha'esh. Where were we in our parsha? Do we have it over here? Oh, we have it over here. Or if we want to go back to the Hebrew English, we have, when I ascended the mountain to receive the stone tablets, the tablets of the covenant that Hashem made with you, I remained on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. I neither ate nor drank water. And if we go, we have over here, at the end of 40 days and 40 nights, God made the two stone tablets, the tablets of the covenant. And we're putting together a bunch of the psukim, engraved, which were engraved, pasuk yud. The hemshech lazeh, vayhi miketz arba'im yom va'arba'im laila, and as the verses continue, as you see here, and 40 days and 40 nights passed. Natan Hashem elai shnei haluchos ha'avanim luchos habrit. Hashem gave the two tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant. Asher kolzo mofia behemshech lenemar uvecherev hiksatem ba'aliyas gomer. However, all of this is coming as a continuation to what came before, which I did not bring those psukim, but if we look at what came before pasuk tes, they're not such. Let's look at pasuk ches. I'll read it in English. And at Horeb, you angered the Eternal, so that the Eternal was filled with anger against you and wished to destroy you. That's a pretty negative pasuk. Vayomer kum red vefen vered min ahar v'gorme v'shnei luchot sabrit al shnei yedei v'eret hina chatatam, and the v'gomer v'tesh v'shnei luchot v'shlem al shnei yedei v'ashbaram leinechem. And if we continue over here to pasuk Yud Zayin, so I grasped the two tablets and hurled them from my two hands, shattering them before your eyes. That's again pretty negative description of what happened with the luchos and what happened in this instant that Moshe is sharing. Kilomar bidvarav kan ba Moshe lahaflia begodel ha'ilui shel haluchos. So even though this is a negative context, we're talking about the Jewish people angering Hashem, and we're talking about Moshe Rabbeinu breaking the luchos. Nonetheless, Moshe is bringing out the greatness of the luchos themselves. Vasher mibli habet alken garam chatam shel bnei Yisrael l'shvirchem. So despite the fact that everything that happened caused the luchos to be broken, as it says, v'ashbarachem le'einechem, right over here in Yud Zayin, shattering them before your eyes. Ve'im ken b'shnei psukim ele al kol panim hayat tzarich likatav lo luchos chaser devar hamora al chisaron ele luchos mala. So you would think that maybe it should be written, you might think, luchos written chaser, to teach us that there's some type of chisaron, some type of lacking going on. But rather, it's luchos male. Valken mifarish v'mebaer Rashi ki luchos ksiv. Therefore, Rashi tells us it's written luchos ksiv. Ein kan kol chaser v'chisaron be'inyan. And there's no lacking whatsoever. So let me just show you the pasuk. Here's the Rashi. Rashi writes, Luchos ksiv sheshteyam shavot. It's written, Luchos, it's written to teach us that both of them were identical. And this is on our verses over here. This is an abbreviation of Yud to Yud Zayin from our Parsha. So we just went through a long proof showing us that when Rashi omits the words Lashon Chaser Vav, Lashon Chatzer, etc., then the shortened version of the word does not teach us a lacking whatsoever. So rather, the way that Rashi writes his commentary is not coming whatsoever to teach us any lacking. It's teaching us something great about the luchos, that both of them were identical. The davar zeh madgish b'yeter set et hiyosam shel haluchos mesius elokis. And even more so, this is teaching us the godliness and the greatness of the luchos themselves. Nosaf al kach sheyibedei adam kasher biyoter, or hanimna. So even more so, it's completely impossible for a human. Sorry, it says right here actually. It's very, very difficult for a human, in parentheses, or maybe impossible. Litzamsam shnei dvarim ad sheyu b'shavim mamish b'diuk, to have two physical objects that are completely and totally identical. And we're talking about identical on a godly level, not identical on like, yeah, they both look the same. No, completely identical. Harei sheyesh chidush b'davar legabe haluchos. That there's some type of chiddush right here. There's some type of miraculous aspect to the tablets, the luchos. Al shnei haluchos hayuktuvim aseres adibros. What's written on these luchos, on these tablets? The 10 Commandments. Chamesh hadibros ktuvim al luach echad v'chamesh haktuvim al hasheni. 5 on one and 5 on the other. The harei b'chamesh hadibrot harishonot yesham harbe yoter tevos ve'otios. So on the first commandments, the first 5 commandments, there's actually more letters. Uvechamesh hadibros ha'achronot. Then the second. Think about it. You have Anochi Hashem. You have full psukim in the first set of luchos, and on the second set you have lo tinach, lo tirtzach, lo tignov. Just each one has just 2 words. There's many more letters. V'lich'oira kach haya gam harevach v'hahefzek shebein hatevos v'otios shaveh b'shnei haluchos. And nonetheless, the spacing and the stops between the letters was identical, and they're completely identical. So you have different amounts of words on each one, but nonetheless, the Torah is telling us they were completely identical, which is almost impossible for a human mind to conceptualize. It is making me think about when we make our flyers and we change our fonts around and we change the spacing to make things fit. That's not what happens here. These were godly, physically created in a godly way. And even though they had different amounts of words on each side, they were completely identical, which the Rebbe writes is very difficult and maybe even impossible for the human mind to conceptualize. This is completely miraculous. The yesh lahayir mehanes hanosaf, and also the additional miracles, shayuktuvim mishnei avrehem, that it was written on both sides. That if you looked at the luchos from the front or the back, even though it was engraved and the letters went through, nonetheless you saw it written in the correct way, in the correct direction, from front or back. The Keperish Rashi v'davar mishnei avreim hayu otios nikraos ve'masen nisim haya. As Rashi tells us that from both sides you saw the luchos in the correct way, and this was one of the miracles. The V'mimela hadavar toem heitev es hemshech tochen hakatuv hamivakash laviv levaer et hailui shebeluchos hakadosh baruch hu natan lemoshe. So what's going on here is that even though the continuation of the verses is not so great, what we're hearing is that these luchos that Hashem gave to Moshe, the B'kach Gucha, were completely perfect, where they were great, were elevated, were godly, were miraculous. The B'kach Gucha lahosif chomer hitra'a b'divrei tochachos, and this is also to give context to the divrei tochachos, to the negative, to the words of rebuke. Shenemru kan al yidei Moshe b'va'o lehizaher et b'nei Yisrael, that Moshe said on this day to warn the Jewish people, Zachor al tishkach v'gomer u'vecherev hiksavtem v'gomer, as we have in the later psukim where Moshe is warning them how to behave, how to act, that this should not happen again. Dahainu ze shagarmu b'maaseyam l'shviras haluchos. Seemingly that this is what caused the breaking of the luchos. Oh, so let me just correct myself. The words of tochacha, so to speak, that are given by Moshe Rabbeinu is actually right before this. So I started this little chart here at Pasuk Tes, but if you go up to Pasuk Zion, you have, remember and do not forget how you angered the Eternal your God in the desert from the day you left the land of Mitzrayim until you came to this place. You have been rebellious against the Eternal. And at Chorev, you angered the Eternal, so the Eternal was filled with anger against you and wished to destroy you. So I just read in English the 2 psukim that came before this, Pasuk Zion and Ches, meaning that the buildup is pretty negative. But nonetheless, Rashi is pulling out the idea that the luchos themselves were completely miraculous and completely perfect and beautiful. Masha Enken lifneze beparshas Veschanan sheba nichtav luchos chatzer harei hatochen hamidubar sham hu be'inyan es hadvarim ha'ela davar Hashem el kol kilasam begomer ve'echtav al shnei luchos avanim ve'itna elai. So, on the other hand, or in contradistinction, in last week's parsha, in Eschanan, the psukim that led up to the pasuk that uses the word luchos, which is written without the vav, were positive. These are the words that that Hashem spoke to the nation of Israel, and he wrote on the two luchos, and he gave them to me. Moshe is speaking. Aval ein hakatuv sham osak b'malasam hamiyuchedesh haluchos. But that pasuk isn't dealing with anything unique or special, the miraculousness of the luchos themselves. Ba'al derech zeh b'parshas mishpatim, and this same logic applies to parshas mishpatim, where we said we have a similar dynamic going on, that the phrase luchos comes before in mishpatim, which is before kisese, where Rashi makes his comment. What's going on in mishpatim? See if it's on our chart here. Mishpatim, over there. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, Allah alai hahara, v'hayasham v'esna lach es luchos ha'even v'hatorah v'amitzvah asher kitvei lehorasam. And Hashem says to Moshe, arise on the mountain, and gave him the luchos of stone and the Torah and the mitzvahs which were written to instruct them. Ein hakatuv madgish es mailas haluchos. Again, the Torah itself is not bringing out the special, unique advantage of the luchos themselves. In Mishpatim, Yud, al piza yuvan gam hatam lekach sherashi diak lahavi et perusho al tevas luchos haktuva la'achar pasuk tes. So now, according to this, we can understand why Rashi wants to bring his comment after pasuk tes. Again, here's our pasuk tes. Below al shtei hapamim shebehem nichtav luchos betchilas pasuk tes, and not, this was one of our original questions, and why doesn't he bring this comment over here on the time that the word luchos appears in pasuk tes? The elti hahara lakachas luchos havanim the luchos habrit. When I ascended the mountain to receive the stone tablets, the tablets of the covenant. Tochen hadvarim b'psukim Yud through Yud Aleph. The content, the ideas over here in psukim Yud and Yud Aleph, hu odos haluchos kefi shenitnu lemoshe veiten Hashem elai. These are the luchos as they were when they were given to Moshe, as it says, and God gave me the two stone tablets. Vayhi miketz arba'im yom v'gomer, and 40 days, at the end of 40 days, God gave me the two stone tablets. Masha enkan b'pasuk tes hakatuv osek be'aliyas Moshe lekabel es haluchos. But rather over here in pasuk tes, it's talking about Moshe ascending, going up to get the luchos. Kolomar kefisha luchos haya be'odam etel hakadosh baruch hu. Seemingly, this is the way that the luchos existed in the world or in the context of Hashem. So in a sense, these luchos, the way the luchos are being described in Tes is Etzel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is a godly context. You went up on Har Sinai, and here's where you got the luchos. But when they're being talked about in Yud and Yud Aleph, it's when they came down here into our world. Ubachen hadiyuk behadgasha begodel mailas haluchos, and therefore the place we're going to point out the greatness of the luchos, kedei lahosif bechumras divrei hatochacha livnei Yisrael al shirasam, in order to sort of build up and add to the gravity of the shattering of the luchos in front of Bnei Yisrael. In order to understand, what it actually meant that the luchos were shattered, first we need to understand how great those luchos were. Kem kalpei haluchos lo b'shas hayotam adayin etel hakadosh baruch hu. So it's the luchos not the way they were up in the shamayims in the abode of Hashem. The elte hahara lakachos luchos avanim luchos habrit. When I went up on the mountain to get the luchos of stone, the tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant, eladafka, but specifically כאשר הובאו בידי משה כדי למסורם לבני ישראל שאפילו כפי שנתנם הקדוש ברוך הוא בידי משה היו מציאוס ניילס בתכלס. However, the way they were down here in the hands of Moshe when he brought them down to give them to Bnei Israel, in parentheses, that even the way that Hashem gave them to Moshe, in reality, down in our world, nalis betachlis mitzius hashaychlis lelukim. Essentially, they were completely godly. They were an emanation of godliness. Tuvim be'etzba Elokim, as it says, they were written with the finger of Hashem. She'ena begedrei hanivraim, which is not in the level, it's not in the geder, it's not in the category of creation, of me, of people, of human. Again, like we said, that that idea that there's more words on the first tablet and less words on the second tablet, but nonetheless they were identical. This is not something I can wrap my brain around, or I can visualize, or I can picture. I can believe it, I can. Yud Aleph. Al pi ze yesh levar b'yenei shel Torah al kol panim. Okay, so we kind of answered the question itself, but now the Rebbe is going to give us the gift of the yenei shel Torah, the wine of Torah. Inyan nosaf. There's an additional idea. Tevas luchos haktuva chaser bepasuk Yud Aleph nemra sham b'yachas la'avanim. The word luchos in pasuk Yud Aleph, over here, which time is it written chaser and which time is it written malay? Well, it's written chaser without the vav when it's luchos ha'avanim, the stone tablets. When is it written malay? When it's luchos habris, the tablets of the covenant. Luchos havanim. Ve'elo tevos luchos shalachareza haktuva malay. And the second time luchos comes, it's written full. Hu b'yachas lebri luchos habri. And this is connected to the bris of the covenant with Hashem. Belichera ma'ilasa shel luchos shenitnu hakadosh baruch hu ve'hayu ktuvim be'etzba Elokim. Harehu be'ikar mitzad hiyutam luchos habris asher karat Hashem imachem. And seemingly, the greatness of the tablets that Hashem gave to us, the tablets that are written with the finger of God, this is the luchos habris. This is the luchos of the covenant that Hashem made a covenant with you. Habris bein hakadosh baruch hu l'bnei Israel. It's the covenant between Hashem and the Jewish people. The lo b'kach shehem avanim gashmias, and it's not because they're stone, physical. So maybe it should be the opposite. That Lashon Malay is over here when it says Avani. Linkot lehefech luchos avanim maleh v'luchos habrit chatzer. That maybe it wants to teach us the opposite. So switch it around. Lichtov ketiv sheshteyam shavo. And then we're going to say, because they're both identical. So you write it a little bit grander form with the stone, and you write it missing form with the covenant, because I already know the covenant is something special, is godly, and stone is just physicality. So you're going to write, so you think maybe it should be the opposite, and then Rashi is going to tell this comes to show that they're identical. Kedei ladgish lagabe luchos habris esmailos so shel shaycham lelokim. To show us that the greatness of the luchos habris also is on the eben, is on the stone. Achal pi hanal hadavar muvan shechen iker hadgashka kan ena hatochen haruchni. However, according to everything that we just discussed, we understand that the main point is actually not the spiritual, the ruchni. Sheluchos habrit hem inyan eloki. That the luchos that the tablets of the covenant are godly. Ela shagam gashmias shel haluchos hiutam latet luchos avanim. But rather that the physical stone of the luchos, the stone luchos, asher betocham zaheta hashvira vashvarim leinechem, which that's what was shattered, right? The stone is what was actually shattered, as it says, and I shattered this before your eyes. Ki inyan eloki ad kedekach sheshteham shavot. That the stone tablets are also, or not even also, are exactly the same thing, are a godly godly existence, so much so that the two of them are completely identical. And even though this has two opposite ideas in it, a stone and a covenant with the Holy One, blessed be He, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Rashi's telling us they are both identical. Limarot misparan shel otios v'hatevos shebeluach ha'echad shaya gadol v'la'ein shiur mivizulato hasu begodel echad imo afal pichan shtehan shavot. And even though one of them had many more letters than the other, nonetheless, Rashi is explaining to us that they are both completely identical. So that is our Sicha. I hope I did justice in going through it. It's a lot of details. I did want to, there's this beautiful Hosafa here, which I'm not going to go through line by line, but I did want to just pull out a few of them. And I guess I can stop the share here. Because I don't think it's in the, I don't think it's in this, in the chart. So we have, if you look at the Hosafa, if you look at Vav, it says in Parshas Noach, Tes Yud Beis Laredet Olam, that he went out into the world, Nichtav Chaser, Sheyesh, and Rashi writes over there that it's written Chaser, Sheyesh Doro Shalo Hutzrahu Laos Lafi Tzadikim Gamurim Hayuchulo. Chesron Beis Laredet Olam Chaser Behem Doro Shel Cheskyu Chulo. That Rashi points out that it's written in Chaser. That there will be nations that will not appreciate that there's a chisaron that will come in the future. And let me point out another one. We have a very famous, you look on the next page, you have Yud Daled in Toldos Kafhe Chaf Daled, Vihine Tumam, and you are carrying twins. And it's written in Lashon Chatzer, and it says over there, Chatzer, Chule, Echad Tzadik, Echad Rasha. One Yaakov will be a tzaddik, and one will be a Rasha. This is Esav, and this is a inyan of a chisaron, and it's pointed out there. And anyway, we have pasuk by pasuk going through when a chisaron, a lacking, is pointed out, or a mila is pointed out. And in some cases, we see that, like if you look at Tes, as it says, Velo Yashav Ktiv Oto Hayaminahu Shafet Aleim, and Lot was sitting, and this is an inyan of a mila. That the behaviors of the people of Sodom did not impact him, and we have line by line. I'm not going to go through all of them, where it's pulled out which one is a lacking and which one is a mila, and the Rebbe shows us the different ways in which Rashi indicates this, which is consistent with what we learned with our Sicha.